So in this very brief video, we're going to be covering some of the Phase 2 and Phase 3 legislation that came out last week that affects small business owners. In this video, we're going to talk about the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, known as the EIDL, and sometimes referred to as the EIDL loan. So in this video, we're going to talk about what the EIDL grant is, some of the key features of that EIDL grant versus other SBA 7B loans, how to use it with the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP, which we will cover in a separate video, but I want to show the interrelation. And then how do you prepare to apply for the EIDL loan? So what is an EIDL grant? Well, the SBA 7B2 loans are traditionally used as low-interest loans that are provided in disaster areas. They are designed to be administered by the SBA, and they're generally designed to be repaid. In the CARES Act, which was the Phase 3 legislation that was passed this past Friday, they introduced what was called an EIDL loan, again an SBA 7B2 grant. That grant being a key word. This is not a loan. This is a grant. It is not designed to be repaid. It is specific to COVID-19 economic harm. You will, like a traditional 7B2 loan, go to the SBA to apply for this grant, but it is designed to be unpaid and it is designed to be forgiven. What you can see on the screen there is that there is a separate, streamlined approach to apply for this grant. So the features of the EIDL grant, it is maxed at $10,000 in terms of that amount that is a grant, that amount that is designed not to be repaid and will align with the PPP grant that we'll talk about momentarily. The grant is supposed to have a low documentation review threshold. I have heard from clients today who have used the specific COVID-19 link for the EIDL grant that it has been a very streamlined process. And it does not require repayment, as I mentioned before, but it will be incorporated into the SBA 7A loan, known as the PPP loan. And the grant has a dedicated application site as well as process. So how does this differ from the PPP loan? As you can see on this slide here, the EIDL grant is to maintain payroll support, provide sick leave, cover rental costs, and repayment obligations, also to cover increased costs to obtain materials given the economic disruption we're going under. Whereas the PPP loan, again, a similar list: payroll cost, continuation of health insurance, employee salaries, mortgage and rent payments, utilities, and debt obligations. Now, pay attention to the mortgage aspect of it as well as the debt obligations. On the PPP grant, when you go for loan forgiveness, you will only be forgiven on the interest aspect of those debt obligations, not on the principal that you use for principal repayment of those loans. Really, the primary benefit of the EIDL grant is its timing as compared to the PPP loan. So for the way the CARES Act is written, we're really looking at those entities that were in place before February 15th of 2020. If you were an ongoing entity, if you had under 500 employees, you pretty much automatically qualify for the EIDL grant. Starting March 30th, kind of around this date, one of the things that we've seen is just today is when they've had that streamlined application come through. Up and until June 30th, and June 30th is crucial because that's the last date that you can apply for and be qualified for that PPP 7A loan. So if we're following along the timeline, ultimately what we're going to see is the EIDL grant can be viewed as a prepayment or a bridge loan to get us to getting to that PPP 7A loan. So who qualifies and how many of there are there? So an eligible entity, as I mentioned before, is in a business with less than 500 employees. It includes sole props and it includes S corps. That you were in operations during the covered period. So any time before January 1st of 2020 up until February 15th is one of the key dates they're looking at, and that you are going to be an ongoing entity through 12/31/2020. One of the other aspects is it's a low documentation loan. So for the most part, a self-certification is going to be what allows us to get this EIDL grant. How many are there? So the way that the CARES Act was written is there's an allocation of $10 billion that are going towards these grants. Each grant can be no more than $10,000. So if we do the math on it, 10 billion by 10,000, we've got 1 million of these loans out there and are available. So the grant is first come, first served. There is a time element to it, but I also want to make sure that you're aware that there are 1 million of these grants out there. I want you to be proactive. I want you to follow the website that we have in the email and that we showed you on the screen earlier and apply for the EIDL grant. But I also don't want you to feel such a time pressure as to not think that you're able to do it correctly or that we can't ensure that this is incorporated into your strategy. Primarily the strategy here is we're going to get the EIDL grant. We're going to utilize some of our external vendors or some of our external lenders to ensure that we've got income continuity. We're ultimately going to use the PPP grant for when we start to ramp back up as a practice and see patients again. That being said, wanted to ensure that you knew what the strategy was so that as we get brainstorming on the PPP grant aspect of it, you know why that wasn't the first video that we put out. So that's kind of the EIDL grant in a quick segment. Thank you.